The interview is in large measure, but not solely, about courage. Teachers of this country in many cities, lamentably cowardly, afraid of dying of COVID from third graders. Staggering. And they say they follow the science. One of my favorite thinkers on Earth, I admit that outside of Earth there may be many finer thinkers, but on this planet is Michael Walsh, excuse me. Michael Walsh. I mean, I know Michael so many years, but I blow names all the time. I'm always happy I got my wife's name right. Michael Walsh is an original mind. That's the highest compliment I give. And he is a moral thinker. And whenever he publishes a book, I have him on. His latest is Last Stand. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Why Men Fight When All Is Lost. Michael has written a number of books about the situation of the human condition, which is my favorite type of book. This one is a fascinating book, taking battle after battle, but it's really not just about war or battles. It's about life, where people, knowing that they would die, kept fighting. Michael, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Dennis, it's great to be back with you. Thank you for having me on.
For my listeners' edification, where are you now living?
At the moment, I'm at my house in rural New England, where it's a crisp 20 degrees or so at the moment. We're heading into the coldest part of the winter, so pretty soon we'll be down below zero and snug as bugs and rugs up here.
And the rest of the time?
I spent most of last year at my home in Ireland, Dennis, on the west coast of Ireland, where I rebuilt my great-grandmother's birthplace in honor of her and of my family some years back, and that's where I'm now, as a matter of fact.
That's quite a life. That's why I wanted people to know that. Have you emotionally connected to Ireland?
Well, I think it's always part of every Irishman's upbringing, Irish-American upbringing. There's a recognition of our heritage and where we came from, the struggles we had to go through to come here. Dennis, as you know, the history of Ireland is one of 700 years of oppression by the English and then 100 years of dying on rickety coffin ships coming over to America to try to start a new life and contribute something to this country. So, yes, I'm very fond of it. I'm related to most of the people in my very rural area who are first and second cousins, and it's just a wonderful place to be. It's going through, unfortunately, the same thing the rest of the world is going through right now with COVID madness and immigration madness, but it's still good old Ireland as far as I'm concerned.
Has the left taken over much of life there, like here?
Well, Ireland has a very unusual electoral system, which was, like most other horrible things, was imposed on us by the English. And the only other place that uses it is the island of Malta. So for those of you who are interested in exotic electoral systems, check out Ireland and Malta. But it effectively results in a one-party state. The two parties there, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, I won't bother to go into the etymology or the history, divided over the question of whether Ireland should sign the treaty that was negotiated after the revolution against England in the 1920s and 30s or not. And so that question is unfortunately still not settled because the British control 6 counties of the north. But it's forgotten by most people. So we have basically a uniparty system, and they dictate according to their whim.
But in general, like the schools in this country are essentially left-wing seminaries. Is that true there?
It's hard to say. The schools, until relatively recently, Ireland retained its Catholicism, but they've been busily demolishing that. So you are looking at the deinstitutionalization of a faith that kept the people together from the time that William the Conqueror and others landed, in this case Strongbow, the century after Hastings, and from the time of Cromwell, when the persecution was so bad that the people were dispossessed of their language, their land. They were herded into churches and burned alive. They were executed in particularly gruesome ways. So the church held the people together, but now it's being deinstitutionalized. Abortion has been made legal. Gay marriage, of course, has been made legal. And so it's on the run, and I don't see things changing much. There's a great push for immigration from the third world, particularly Afghanistan, the Middle East, and Central Africa, because Ireland is considered too white. And there's even a program called Ireland 2040, which will change the ethnic makeup of the country irrevocably.
And I want to get to your book, obviously, but you're so interesting, and this is something that's new to most of my listeners. What is the rationale behind the notion that Ireland is too white? What is that? Let me put it to you this way. If I asked somebody there, is Nigeria too black, what would they say?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. The Irish are embarrassed. It's funny because, as you know, there's a left-wing historian named Noel Ignatieff, I think a Canadian, who wrote a book called How the Irish Became White, because they were never considered white, certainly not by the English, and barely by the Americans when we started coming here in really very large numbers in the mid-19th century. And so it's considered a kind of relic. People seriously ask questions why are there no black faces in medieval Irish history? And getting to your point about courage and about teachers, I mean, you just have to wonder, where does that kind of stupidity come from? If you say it's just the way it evolved, then it becomes a plot and it's racism and we've got to overcome it. Ireland's in the grip of the left pretty solidly at this point. I mean, what do you say to a country that legalizes abortion, then turns around and says, we need more people to come in because our pension system will fail, so therefore we have to increase the population?
Well, even putting abortion aside, you're entirely right, but that is the Achilles heel of socialism. Let's keep expanding the government, but somebody has to pay for the government. And if you don't have more young people, you got to bring them in.
Right. Well, that's Germany, for example, obviously, and that's to a lesser extent the United States. We are not in the worst possible situation here, unlike many of the European countries. It's interesting that Denmark...
I know. Go ahead. I know I was going to report that. Go ahead.
Am I stepping on your line?
No. Are you kidding? It's a non-issue. Go ahead.
Denmark has said the ideal number of new immigrants is 0. So that's a pretty brave thing to say in
and they
Europe
went
today.
Further. I mean, that the whole essence of being a Dane will be changed.
Yes, and that's considered a racist statement
that's
by
the
the left.
quintessence of racism.
Yes. But, how do the Jewish people feel about that, Dennis? What if you were told you have to cast aside 5,000 years of Judaic history and become something that you're not? I mean, what has held the Jewish people together in the face of hostility, provocation, persecution, etc.?
Now, it is astonishing, isn't it? Of course you're right. Of course. I mean, even left-wing Israelis, or at least liberal Israelis, would think it preposterous. Let us have a plan, Israel 2040, because Israel is too Jewish.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's beyond belief.
All right. Now we wander into things that people aren't supposed to say or point out, and here we are back at courage again, aren't we, Dennis?
Courage is everything. And you know that. And the book is magnificent. By the way, I looked at the Amazon number. It's doing really well.
Oh, we were a huge hit. We sold out on day one. Day one, it was all copies were gone. So we had to scramble to get, 20,000, 30,000 more copies in the pipeline over the Christmas break and with all the COVID slowdowns and everything. So we're doing very well, and that's thanks to people like you and my other friends on the conservative side of the aisle who have
Last
gotten behind
Stands,
it.
Why Men Fight When All Is Lost. Coming up with the inimitable Michael Walsh.